What up, everybody? It's Chris Roscoe with Operation Moksha, and today I'm going to be talking about. I don't actually have a good word for this, but I'm going to call it masculine rage, for lack of a better phrasing, because somebody sent me a message asking to talk about masculine rage, and I wasn't really sure what they were talking about, so I asked for clarification, and this is what is said. I won't tell you who said this, though. When you feel like inferior, when people cross your boundaries, when girls cheat, in general, these things can make you build up a lot of frustration. I have a lot of frustration because I was bullied and beat up, and my bullies, everyone looks like a monster. I haven't actually finished reading this, but when I have so much rage inside, if I scream, it's not okay. If I punch something, it's not okay. How do I get that energy out so it can be okay? Man, what a good fucking question. What an honest question, what a vulnerable question, what a real question, and what an ultimately really fucking good question, because I think this is something that a lot of people deal with, and it's something that I definitely dealt with. And this comes from a lot of myths about being a guy and what being a guy looks like and what being good looks like and all these sorts of things. Because basically what happens is, we came to the cultural understanding and the cultural conclusion that not all guys have been great. Plenty of us have been. Lots of us have been. But enough of us have not been to make a cultural impact that really needed to be adjusted and needed to be addressed. Now, a lot of times it's easy to just say, okay, yeah, a lot of people do some really fucked up shit. I'm aware of the fucked up shit. I have my own boundaries. I have my own values. I have my own ethics, all that sort of stuff. And then you don't really ever have to go too far into repression. But I don't know if this happens for women a lot of the time. I don't really hear it from women a lot. But for men, generally, what happens is it's easy for us to have a sense of guilt and shame around our masculinity because of all the potential harm that it could cause, for all the potential harm that maybe it's caused in our lives up until this point, and also for the potential harm that a lot of other people have used these skills and these energies to do harm with. So there's a big possibility for shame, there's a big possibility for fear, there's a big possibility for repression, there's a big possibility for a lot of different things when you take a look at all these cultural impacts on us in the way that we look at it. Now, this can lead a guy to repress his masculinity and repress his anger and repress his rage and repress his more assertive, dominant side in order to not be one of the people that adds to the problems and makes things worse. Now, this is it's essentially inherently noble at its core, but it's misguided. Because there's a big distinction, right? Like, Jordan Peterson has this thing about there's a difference between a harmless man and a good man. And a harmless man cannot be a good man because sometimes in order to be a good man, you need to step into conflict. You need to step into all these things. Like maybe you need to fight somebody off who's harming somebody that you love, or maybe you need to stand up and take a stand. And if you're kind of pathologically avoidant to conflict and pathologically avoidant to aggression, then your range of what can actually be considered good is pretty minimal. You're basically on the harmless side, which means like you won't do bad things, but you won't also do good things that require you to step into conflict and aggression and all these sorts of things. So you're kind of kneecapped and you're limited. But this isn't widely taught to a lot of guys. And so we don't see the inherent value in our dominance and our aggression and our masculinity and all these sorts of things. We don't see it as a protective mechanism. We don't see it as something to protect what is sacred and vulnerable and all these sorts of things. A lot of times we are just taught to see it merely as a bludgeoning tool that has just beat the shit out of society throughout history and not really given any nuance or any integrated value into what the purpose of these things serve. And so a lot of times guys can overcorrect and just simply repress all that stuff and lean into being just a nice guy who's essentially harmless. Now, there is honor in that because you're seeing a problem with the world and you're attempting to set it right. You're attempting to no longer add to the problems. You're even attempting to detract from them by being the opposite of them. There is value in there, but it is misguided in the sense that you do still need that stuff. You can't just get rid of it. Because what happens is a lot of this stuff that was said in this message is an inevitable and predictable result of repressing that stuff. If you don't have access to your aggression and your dominance, then you will be bullied. Because the people who are aggressive and the people who are dominant, they will look at somebody who doesn't have the ability to step into conflict, and they'll be able to tell that that person can get pushed around, and that person won't fight back, and that person won't stand up for themselves. So they essentially become an easy target. And when you keep repressing your rage and your anger, those are the things that are designed to help you stand up for yourself. Those are the things that are designed to help you like decide how the fuck it's gonna go for you, and then make it that way. And so if people take advantage of you and you kind of habitually and pathologically repress your anger, basically what's happening is people will be angering you by crossing your boundaries and doing all kinds of things like cheating on you, like this person said. All these things happen because we don't have a robust sense of don't fuck with me in our presence. And so it conveys, instead of conveying don't fuck with me, it conveys it's okay to fuck with me because I won't do anything about it. And then people keep fucking with you, and you keep that repressed even more, and that thing that's designed to make it so people don't fuck with you, just it boils bigger and bigger and bigger, and gets more and more out of control because it's designed to protect you from all the shit that you fucking hate. The part of you that's designed to protect you from that is getting repressed, and so it can't do its job. And so it's getting more and more angry, more and more upset, and it goes to more and more intense lengths to get your attention so that you can finally listen to it, you can finally acknowledge it, you can finally start standing up for yourself and doing everything that you need in order to feel really, really good about yourself and about your life and about your future and about your relationships and all that sort of stuff. And so this kind of rage that we're talking about here comes from a misguided attempt to be good. And we mistake harmless for good. Harmless is not good. Sometimes to be good, you must cause harm. Sometimes to be good, you must hurt people's feelings. You must tell the truth about what you think and what you want and what you feel. And sometimes that will hurt people's feelings. And so oftentimes the more moral, the more right, the more just, the more good thing to do will hurt somebody's feelings. And sometimes the right, good, and just thing to do is to hurt somebody physically if you really need to. And if you don't have access to that, you become the victim. And to be the victim and to be perpetrated against over and over again is to build that rage higher and higher until you run the risk of becoming a villain yourself and saying, fuck it, I'm tired of trying to be good. I'm tired of trying to take the high road and all this sort of stuff. Well, all the assholes get everything. So you run the risk of becoming one of them. Or you run the risk of just spending the rest of your life not getting what you want and dying with regret and feeling a whole hell of a lot of shame. So what I personally recommend is understanding the purpose that this rage is supposed to serve and to integrate it into your life. Because this is what happened to me. Like the same thing was happening to me. I was getting emotionally abused by girlfriends. I was getting cheated on by girlfriends. I didn't have a lot of respect for myself. I wasn't getting what I wanted. I was broke. All kinds of problems. And again, that caused all this rage to build up in me. And so I had to learn how to express that rage. Now, the interesting piece of nuance here is that when it turns into just pure rage, expressing it to the people that you need to express it to or you're having issues with cannot always be a good idea, because you may have a backlog of rage that may be like 5, 10, maybe even 20 years in the making. And so to express that to somebody who just crossed a boundary, it might be a minimal boundary, but they would face the wrath of 20 years of repressed rage and anger. So it's not always going to be appropriate to do that. So really what you need to be doing is, if you have built up rage, is you need to find a safe container to express that rage so that you can kind of drain your tank and start to think a little bit more clearly about what types of things trigger your anger and what types of things need to be done in order to avoid those triggers. Like, do I need to set boundaries? Do I need to stand up for myself? Do I need to distance myself from people? Do I need to exercise more? Like, all these sorts of things. Do I need to be honest about my desires? Like, all these different things start to show up. And so as you repress that rage, which you can do any number of ways. I started Kung Fu, I joined a men's circle, I got into fire spinning, I used to beat up my couch, I did all kinds of things in order to start expressing my rage. And then as that gets out, you realize that if you start setting those boundaries, you stop it from being created in the first place. Because the rage is there to tell you that something's wrong, that a boundary isn't being respected, or a value is being violated, or all these sorts of things. The anger is there to tell you about that so that you do something about it. And if it doesn't get done, it turns into rage. So as you express the rage, it'll go back down into anger. And then the anger will tell you what you need to do in order to protect yourself. And then if you do that, it won't ever turn into anger. It'll just turn into like an irritation that you set a boundary for, or you communicate something for. And then it never turns into rage. And so you've successfully integrated it so that the mechanism that caused your rage stops causing it. And you've been able to integrate the wisdom of why that thing was happening in the first place. So, long story short, in order to wrap all this up, basically what I'm saying is that if It's kind of more geared towards masculine people, but if you are a masculine person or you're attempting to be, and you have a large amount of rage that's stopping you from being able to express that stuff, it's probably a cyclical thing where that rage happened because you weren't expressing it, and then the fact that you weren't expressing it made the rage happen, so now it's even harder to express it, so it keeps the cycle going. So the pattern interrupt to do that is to start expressing the rage so you can diminish it and start to bring it down to a manageable level, understand what created it in the first place, set appropriate boundaries, have appropriate communication, do whatever it is you need to do in order to be more what's the word I'm looking for here? To be more sovereign in your own being so that people can't push you around anymore. And eventually you get this little like energetic barrier around you that says, do not fuck with me. And it's not like, do not fuck with me because I'll beat you up or I'll kill you or anything like that. Most of the time when it comes to people that would be willing to take advantage of you or anything like that, all you really need to communicate with them in your being is that fucking with me is more trouble than it's worth. That's it. Because they'll go for somebody who won't push back. So if you communicate with your being that like, it won't be easy to fuck with me, I'll make it hard for you, I'll make it not worth it, I'll make it suck for you. It doesn't have to be I'll beat you up, it doesn't have to be I'll kill you, it doesn't have to be I'm scarier than you, it just has to be it won't be easy and it won't be fun for you and it won't be worth it. So as long as you have boundaries and as long as you're able to communicate difficult things you need to communicate and willingly get into conflict when you need to, it will be not worth it to mess with you for most people that would want to, and they'll just pass you up for a more easy target. And then you gain the self-respect, and then you gain all the opposite things of the rage. You feel powerful, you feel strong, you feel confident, and your brain even starts to create different chemicals. When you're in that lower kind of like rage-filled perspective, your brain's creating a lot of cortisol, it's creating a lot of adrenaline, and it's not creating very much serotonin and dopamine. But as you flip the script and you start to be not at the effect of the world around you, but you start to be the one that affects the world around you, your brain will create less cortisol, it will create less adrenaline, and it will start creating more serotonin and dopamine, which will start the flow to go in the opposite direction. And so your brain is set up to know where you're at on this scale and to give you chemicals accordingly. So if you're on the repressed rage side, just start to express that, figure it out, set your boundaries, and your brain will literally shift the chemicals and your whole world will shift as a result. So, this is kind of a long-winded explanation for this, but I think I covered most of the main points. If you have any questions about this, let me know. I'll be happy to go into it deeper. And I'll see you next time. See you.